Hello and welcome to another book review. This month is obviously for October, and quite conveniently or atmospherically there is a huge storm blowing outside, so that's why the lighting is a bit dodgy, and sorry if you can hear any wind or anything. It's currently like 46-mile-an-hour winds or something like that today. We have someone coming to stay, so I have very limited time to actually film this. So we better get started and we better get speaking quickly. So the first book that I read this month, and I have to be careful on how I say it, but it is Adventures of a Young Naturalist. Got it right, by David Attenborough, because Naturist would be something very different, and I'm not sure that's what Attenborough's thing is. I love David Attenborough, as I'm sure most people do. I think he's brilliant. I love his shows, and he's certainly brought certain environmental issues and stuff to the forefront. So it feels a bit blasphemous what I'm about to say, but there are large patches of this book that I found boring. Sorry, David. There is loads of writing about getting to each place, not a lot about the actual animals. The bits about the animals were great, like there's really good passages about Houdini, he's like a pig but he's not a pig because he's in South America. There's, I believe it was Charlie the orangutan, and those stories were really good, but they were just interspersed with really long accounts of, and we had to travel here but this didn't work and we couldn't get a connection to this place, and that just got really boring and tedious. There is also the fact that what he was doing essentially, this is this is like his diary from the 1950s where he's going to different countries and essentially collecting animals. So he goes to Guyana, Indonesia and Paraguay, essentially trying to pick up unusual species to take them back to London Zoo, which would never ever happen now. That would just not be allowed. I know it's the 1950s, but it was hard to read about Attenborough doing that when it's Attenborough telling me all about how we need to save the planet and look after the environments and this, that and the other about the animals, when he went and stole a load of them in the first place so that we could have them in London Zoo. So that was a bit of a mind mess with. And to be fair to him, he does say that in the first couple of pages that this wouldn't happen now, and it's not something that he kind of wishes he hadn't done, but still doesn't sit right with me. It's really quite problematic in my brain. This book is split into 3 trips, as I said, one to Guyana, one to Indonesia and one to Paraguay, and it's basically 3 books in one. So when you get to the next trek, so to speak, they actually do get better as you go on. I think the Indonesia one's my favourite because there's more animal stories and being with local people and things like that than there is in the other 2, which was more interesting for me. The other problem I had, and the reason why it took me so long to read it, is it's got really small print and there's quite a lot of words in it that I found hard to read and had to try and really figure out what they were trying to mean to me. And lastly, as someone with a huge fear of snakes, this book was a little bit too snaky for me. There were big old passages about catching sort of boa constrictors and things like that. I don't want to read about that. That would give me nightmares. If you're an Attenborough fan, it probably is worth a read. I just wish they focused more on the animals and less about the travelling, to be quite honest. That's my opinion of it. The animal sections were really good and very entertaining, but there was just a lot of dross in between it. My second book that I read was White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and my first gripe with this book, there's no blurb. There is nothing in this book, not in the front covers, the back covers, on the back of the book, that tells me what the book is about. There is, so the whole of the back cover, the whole of the front cover, and then about 3 pages of telling me how wonderful the book is from various people and magazines and stuff. but there is nothing on this book that tells me what the book is about. So that angered me to begin with. And I know it's a classic and it became a classic really, really quickly, but I found it really, really bland. I didn't take anything from it. There was nothing in it that excited me. It's just bland. And the chapters are just too long, particularly when nothing happens in them. And it's just not a good read for me, to be honest. It felt like she'd written a bunch of short stories and then just tried to squish them all together in a hope that they made sense in a big long novel, which they don't. There are certain chapters that I found worse than others, like there's this whole one about them being war. I'm not a huge war movie fan or war fiction fan anyway, but when it's like that, yeah, no, I could have left it, to be honest. There were many times during this book that I wanted to stop reading it, and that never happens. It's my sheer bloody mindedness, really, that kept me going. A lot of the stories are repeated throughout this book, I guess for some sort of plot point, but again, didn't really do anything for me. It just frustrated me that I've then got to read another 10 pages of the same story again, because it's quite a chunky book for nothing happening. Each time there are four sections in it, and each time we got to a new section I really hoped it would suddenly become really good again, and it didn't. Obviously the title is White Teeth, so there's lots of mention of teeth so that it can, you know, relate to the title, but actually the bits about teeth didn't need to be there. So I'm sure you're getting the impression here that I didn't like it, and that would be true. I found it very bland and a real chore, and I highly doubt I'll be picking anything else up by Zadie Smith, because if this is supposed to be her most accomplished and brilliant work, I'm not going to enjoy the others. And I'm sure there are those of you out there that love this book, and I'd be really interested to hear what it is that you really enjoyed, because obviously I missed something if it's supposed to be a classic and a real triumph, so I'd be interested to see what I did miss. But yeah, I certainly won't be recommending this to anybody. Lastly, because Attenborough and Zadie Smith took me so long to read both of them, I have one more book, and that is This Is Gonna Hurt by Adam Kay. This is essentially a diary form going through his time as a junior doctor up to being a senior registrar, I believe, and the process. Obviously you don't get a diary entry for every day, but you get bits, and then each time he changes job he writes a little bit more of a sort of prose to it. And after the other two books, this was a real welcomed respite to have a fast-paced book, and I think part of that is down to the fact that it's written in diary entries, and some of the diary entries are like 3 sentences long, so it was definitely fast-paced, and I found it actually really interesting. Bits of it really did make me laugh. I particularly like the running theme of things that people got stuck up their bum. Weird. People are odd, aren't they? There's stories like that really did make me giggle, just for the sheer fact that someone actually did that. There is one downside to this book that I found, and it might just be me, but it's got footnotes, and I always struggle with books that have footnotes because I find that I'm looking for the symbol, so I miss bits, so I have to go back and reread it, or I completely miss the symbol because I'm really into what I'm reading, and then I'm like, oh, where does this relate again? So I have to go back again, and I'm just not very good with footnotes, and that I've never really liked books with footnotes. I always find it really quite distracting. I like the information I get in a footnote, I just don't like that format of it. I probably would have preferred him just to add it in or put it in brackets or something, but I guess that would have ruined the flow and it wouldn't have been his diary entry, so I can understand why they've used footnotes. I just don't like them. Other than that, it gave me a real, not that I didn't respect them in the first place, but a real newfound respect for doctors, and certainly junior doctors. I didn't know the process I knew they had to go and work in a hospital after they'd finished their training, but I didn't realise that essentially the junior doctor phase is right up until they're a consultant, and that there's lots of different stages that they have to go through that gives them a little bit more money and a lot more responsibility. And again, obviously I've got friends that work in the NHS, so I've heard about the shifts and how it can impact and stuff, but actually reading the fact that he was supposed to come off work at say 7 AM but he's still there at 10 and he's got to start another shift at like 1. Well, and he's got a huge commute home, so how does that even work? I mean, it worries me that so many of our healthcare professionals are gonna be that knackered. How are they gonna provide a good level of care if they're not even given the opportunity to actually be able to have the human need of sleep? I'm a big believer in sleep. It is affirmed to me even more that I would be a rubbish doctor or nurse or midwife or anything like that because I just couldn't manage the shift work, let alone any of the other stuff. It did give me a huge newfound respect for people that work in the NHS, basically. Just how much they're put upon and what's expected and things like that. The fella who wrote this worked at Obs and Gynae, so that's cesareans and problems with birthing, and then just various things to do with your lady parts mainly. It was interesting actually for me, because seeing as they're all, and he says it himself, they're all kind of in the same boat and they're all experiencing the same issues, but there is so much, like, he thinks loads of his colleagues are really thick and problematic, and actually he's really harsh on some of the other people in the profession. It might just be personalities rather than the actual job role, but that surprised me actually. I guess more the fact that it's the same in every profession. You get it in a university where I work, when I worked for a charity, it happened there. Just people thinking that others just aren't competent to do their job. But I don't know why it surprised me that that was the case as well on a ward. It amused me a lot that within the different specialities, I think that's probably the wrong word, specialisms maybe, amongst doctors, so where you can choose to go into like paediatrics or obs and gynae or what's the bone ones, orthopedics, that there's like a hierarchy, or at least Adam Kay, who wrote this book, believes there's a hierarchy, and orthopedics are essentially the cavemen of the doctors because they just deal with broken bones. And that made me laugh because we certainly say similar kind of things in my role, obviously not about orthopedics because we don't know about that, that's not what we do, but there are certain things that we say within a university and a hierarchy and things like that. So it just amused me that there are so many similarities that just follow through all jobs, no matter what the sector is. I saw in Sainsbury's actually the other day that he's got one out at the moment specifically for Christmas, and I would quite like to read it. I won't get it while it's in hardback because it's pointless. But yeah, no, I would like to read it because I did enjoy this one. I don't know whether I enjoyed it more because I didn't enjoy the other books I read this month, or whether it just really was an interesting read for me. Yeah, no, I did. It was fast paced, it made me laugh. It did make me get the feels at some point, particularly at the end when he's explaining why he left the profession. That definitely struck a chord with me, I guess, and it was just thoroughly enjoyable. So they're the 3 books that I read this month. I'll be back with you with another book review at the beginning of December, so we'll cover what we read in November then. If you like this video and want to see more like it, I'll link the playlist here. And if you've liked this video in particular, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And I will see you in the next upload. Bye!